Welcome to the Excruciating Minutiae Podcast, where we obsess about sports, pop culture, and politics, but mostly sports. Here are your hosts, Randy and Steven.
Happy Saturday to everyone out there. Today we're going to be making our picks for tomorrow's AFC and NFC championship game. Randy, take it away.
So we have arguably, as I said, the best four teams remaining in football playing this week. So which game do you want to tackle first? LA at New Orleans?
That is the early game.
New Orleans is the 3.5-point favorite as of the line you had sent me. It's a rematch. They had played back in week 9. The Saints won 45-35 in a shootout. The Saints had been a pretty high-scoring offense, but they've only scored more than 30 points once since Thanksgiving. We talked about their offense kind of struggling a little bit. The Rams are the top rushing team in the league. They have a high-powered offense themselves, and considering how well they ran the ball against Dallas, the Saints suffered a significant injury in the win against the Eagles. Sheldon Rankins, very important on their defensive line as far as stopping the run, tore his Achilles. He is done for the rest of the playoffs and the season. That's a big loss for the Saints, and that could affect them this week. So I'll turn it to you first. Who do you have?
Well, I've decided this week, that I'm going to go back to the basics. And part of the problem I ran into with my picks last week is I was picking with my gut. And I am going to quote from High Fidelity, John Cusack. He stated, "I've been thinking with my gut since I was 14 years old. And frankly, between you and me, I have come to the conclusion that my guts have shit for brains." So I am going to not go with my gut, because my gut here says that the Rams are not going to lose to the Saints, that the Rams are going to go in there. They're going to just run right over. That's what my gut says. But what my head says is that New Orleans never loses home games in the playoffs, ever. My gut also says, my head also says, New Orleans has beaten them once. They know how to beat them. They found a way, and that they're going to find a way this week. They found a way last week to overcome a 14-point deficit. A Philly team, by the way, that beat the Rams not too many weeks ago. And the home teams typically in these NFC title games are very successful lately. In the last 5 years, all of the home teams, all of them, have won. Going back to 2013, Denver beat New England at Denver. Seattle beat San Francisco. In 2014, New England beat Indy. Seattle beat Green Bay. Both of those, Seattle and New England, were the home teams. In 2015, Denver beat New England. Carolina beat Arizona. 2016, New England beat Pittsburgh and Atlanta beat Green Bay. 2017, New England at home beat Jacksonville. Philly at home beat Minnesota. So that is 5 straight years, 10 straight games the home team has won. Whether or not they cover, I don't know, but I think New Orleans is going to win. It's a 3.5-point spread. I may get burned by the half-point hook, but I am taking New Orleans. I am going to take the under on this game because I think it's going to be a little bit more of a grinded out kind of game. I think there's going to be a little bit less passing and a lot more running. Let's keep in mind that the previous game was an 80-point game, so that's a pretty significant drop. But I think Vegas also thinks, obviously, it's going to be a much lower scoring game. So I'm taking New Orleans minus 3.5, and I'm taking the under 56.5.
You mentioned that there's been a long streak of home teams winning these NFL conference title games. The problem with that long of a streak is that eventually it does come to an end. And when you get into conference title games, you're talking presumably about the best teams in each conference. So this isn't a case of the Saints playing Dallas or Seattle where it would be an easy pick. I actually thought the harder pick for me was going to be the New England-Kansas City game and not the Saints-Rams game. I now have kind of reversed field on that. This is the tougher game for me to pick. And you mentioned going with your gut and going with your logic. I feel like the Saints should win this game. The Dome is a very difficult place for teams to play in. It's going to be a stage. Drew Brees has been here before. Peyton has been here before. The Saints have a great running game. Their defense has really stepped up in the second half of the season. It's not the defense that got blitzed by Tampa in week 1. They've shown the ability to shut teams down. They can shut the Rams down, I think. I want to say the Saints will win. The problem is that I know what I'm picking in my next game, and I almost feel like there's a part of me saying somebody is going to lose that's playing at home this week. And the Rams are a really good team. They can run the football. The Rankins injury, I think, will be significant. I don't think it's going to completely decimate the ability of the Saints to stop the run, but the Rams are clearly a team that can move the football on the ground. This is a tough one. And plus, I'm local here. So the Saints are not my main team. Obviously, I'm a Bears fan, but I live in the New Orleans area, and I've watched Saints games all year long. So picking against them is difficult just from that perspective as well. I'm going to go with the Saints, and I think I may end up regretting this. This would be, if I had more guts, this would be my upset pick, but I will go with the Saints. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a much lower scoring game than the first time around. I think both teams are going to run the football. I think at the very end, it's going to come down to which quarterback may make a mistake, which team may make a mistake. And Breeze has been so efficient this season. I think the Saints will win unless Peyton does something goofy, or if he goes off and we look back next week and say, well, the Saints did this, this, and this. That didn't really make any sense. Then I think that would bring a Rams upset. But barring that, I think the Saints, the home field is going to be maybe the deciding factor here. I'm going to go with the Saints, and I will go with them to cover. I think it's going to be a close game, but I will go with the Saints to win and take them with the spread. So if you're scoring at home, anyone listening at home, I am picking the Saints to win the game outright in that column. I'm also picking the Saints to cover in that column for my own personal scoreboard here on picks. Your scoreboard may vary with mine, but that's what I'm going with there.
What do you think about the over-under?
The over-under is what, 56.5. I think that I think under. I'm going to go with you and say it's going to be under. I don't think it's going to be much under, but I sense that we could have one of these 24-20 type games where the defenses do enough to hold things in check, and running the ball means the clock is going to run, fewer possessions for each team. I think that's going to lead to a much lower scoring game than we saw the first time, and I think it's going to be under. So that's what I'm going with on that.
I immediately want to change both my picks, but that's another story altogether. All right.
Do you immediately? You need to have the clip. I immediately regret my decision.
Exactly.
From Anchorman. You need to get that queued up for future podcasts, because I have a feeling that will come in handy along the way. That leads us to our late matchup, and that's going to be New England at the Chiefs. So again, we have a team in New England that's been there, that's done this. They're rallying around the idea that no one is picking them. Apparently, what was it? Julian Edelman, I think it was, had T-shirts, something like "Bet Against Us" or something like that. They're using that as some bulletin board fodder. But though, as Tom Brady, I think, said in one of these press conferences, you don't really need to get yourself up for this. This is the AFC Championship game. This is playing to go to the Super Bowl. You don't have to really psych yourself up at this point, right? They played earlier this season, way back in Week 6. That was New England winning in another defensive struggle, 43-40, in a really exciting game. That game was in Foxborough. This game is not. I'll say that I think that New England's problem, and we talked about it last week, they are really good at home. They did not lose at home all season, When they went on the road, that's where they struggled. They lost games, I believe, to Tennessee on the road that didn't make the playoffs. They lost to the Lions, did they not, on the road? And that's a really bad loss in retrospect. Playing in Kansas City is a very hostile environment as well. That is a tough place to win. And I'm just thinking of New England, New England's last road playoff losses. They lost in Denver, another really difficult place to play. And those were New England teams that I thought were better than those Denver teams, and they lost on the road. As far as this goes, New England put up 43 points in that game at home. For some reason, I just don't feel, despite all as good as they looked against the Chargers, I don't see them putting up 40 points again in this game. I see Kansas City being able to, and I feel like I'm repeating myself. If Andy Reid doesn't do anything stupid, the better coach out there is Bill Belichick. I'm pretty confident Bill Belichick will have a very good game plan, will stick to it, and will not make any bizarre, crazy decisions. He will not mismanage the clock. He will not call plays that make you scratch your head and go, what in the world is he thinking? Andy Reid has that capability to do that. And that may be the X factor. If Andy Reid stays within himself, if he stays with what has gotten him here, I think Kansas City will win. I think Kansas City will cover. And, again, I don't think they're going to blow New England out, but I can see them beating New England by 10 points. The over-under is, or the line is 55.5 for total points. And my guess is it's going to be over that. But I think the Kansas City defense has improved. I think Barry's return in the second half of the season was a large part to that. And I think they're going to be able to do enough to shut New England down enough, and that they will score enough points with Mahomes and crew to send Kansas City to their first Super Bowl in a very, very long time. Correct? That would be since their last trip to the Super Bowl was the Hank Stram Super Bowl IV, was it not? I think that was their last trip.
I believe you're right.
I think as they would say, they're due. So I think this is finally the year Kansas City gets over the hump. I think it's the year Andy Reid gets back to the Super Bowl, and I'm probably going to regret that decision if New England proves me wrong and goes back again. You said you thought that this was the end for New England last week. I think the end is this week. Maybe not for their dynasty, maybe not for their team's success, but I think this is the sort of a passing of the torch a little bit, where we look at New England and we say, yep, they're not the automatic pick to make it to a Super Bowl anymore. There's a tougher team in town now. So I'm going to go with Kansas City. I'll go with them covering, and I'll go with the over.
Okay.
So this is the point where you say that that's kind of what you were thinking of doing. And now, again, you're now second guessing that, since that's what I've said, is what I'm guessing.
That's exactly what I'm about to say. I had this logical explanation of why I was going to make the pick of Kansas City.
And then I made basically your argument, and then now you're completely second guessing is what you're saying.
You didn't make my argument, but you made an argument. I actually had different arguments. So do you want to know the last time that Tom Brady won a road playoff game?
It's been a while.
It has. It's been 15 years. 2004. New England beat Pittsburgh. Since then, they've had 4 road games in the playoffs. 2005 against Denver, 2006 against Indy, and then 2013 and 2015, both against Denver. The common denominator is they've lost them all with Tom Brady as quarterback. I already mentioned earlier the fact that the last 5 conference title games were won by the home team. It's hard to bet against that. Basically, I have that on one side, and on the other side, I have Tom Brady and you selecting Kansas City. I'm going to stick with my original pick. I'm going to stick with Kansas City because that's my brain, not my gut. And we know what happens with my gut.
Your gut is saying Randy picked this. I can't, in good conscience, agree with him on this. I know how his luck goes when it comes to picking these games. That's what your gut's telling you.
It is. That's exactly what my gut is telling me. But I've decided I'm not going to go with my gut. I am going to go with my head and with the facts. Just the facts. And the facts are that Kansas City is the superior team. New England was lucky to win their matchup back in Foxborough. I just don't think Kansas City is going to be stopped. Plus, it's a home game. It's a great atmosphere. It's a fantastic game. If this game was in New England, I'd go the opposite way.
You think the home field would make that much of a difference for New England?
I do.
I agree with you. I think if this was in New England, then this would be a very, very tough game to pick. But I would just tell myself, how many times did the Colts go to New England in playoff games with Peyton Manning and a team that looked really, really good? And the Patriots, even with teams where they were running out, who was the wide receiver that was playing? Was it Troy Brown was playing defensive back or cornerback?
Yes.
Yeah. Even when they were running guys out, literally they were pulling out of the stands or anywhere is off the roster to play in the secondary. They shut Peyton Manning down in Foxborough. If this game was in New England, I think Mahomes would have a much rougher go, but I think that home field advantage is huge, as you said.
It is. The question is whether weather is going to be an issue. Now, there's a huge storm kind of going across the country. It looks like timing-wise, it will hit Kansas City, but it's going to hit it prior to game time. Earlier in the week, they were saying that it was going to be ridiculously cold. They were talking about like game time temperature being 5. You've probably never experienced a temperature of 5 degrees, have you?
Well, I grew up in the North,
That's
so
true.
I did experience those. It's been a long time since I've felt it be 5. One last note on that is that if weather is a factor, if it's anything that might lend itself to running the ball more, that actually would help New England because, as we pointed out, they ran the ball so effectively against the Chargers. Michel could be a X factor in this game if he could run the ball as well as he did against LA, against Kansas City, allow New England to control the clock more, keep Mahomes and that offense off the field. And then again, that goes back to Andy Reid. Would he be willing to change his game plan around somewhat to accommodate the weather, to maybe move to running the ball more? They seem to do it against the Colts a little bit. Or will he be one of those, no, I'm just going to pass, and then we would look up and be like, yep, that's the Andy Reid we're familiar with. He didn't adapt when he needed to. That could be an X factor, but then again, we'll have to wait and see how things, neither one of us are meteorologists, so we'll have to see how the weather actually does end up turning out and whether or not that has any impact on game plans or how either team approaches things or the game itself. But so we're in the same boats then. We've essentially picked the same team. So if I go down, you go down, is what you're saying.
What was your over-under pick? Or I'm not your over-under. Your over-under pick. I'm sorry.
I picked the over. I thought they would go over. I thought Kansas City would cover, but I did think they would go with the over. I think there will be points scored in this game. I have the same thing. So this is the first time this has happened. We have the exact same picks, both our game picks and our over-under picks. So either we'll both be really smart or we'll both be really dumb. We're usually both really dumb anyway.
Correct.
Whether or not we're really dumb in this particular situation, that remains to be seen. But you could ask a lot of people, and they would tell you we're really dumb on a regular basis. So I think that's a good spot, if any, to end it on that note about us being stupid.
It's pretty appropriate. Yes. We'll be back tomorrow with the first of our 2-part series on the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame voting, which will be announced on this coming Tuesday. Part 1 will focus on the candidates we feel will get in on Tuesday, as well as a breakdown of the 2 players already elected by the Veterans Committee. Part 2 will focus on those who didn't make it in, and I predict a classic Randy rant. Until then, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Excruciating Minutiae Podcast. Check us out at excruciatingpodcast.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms and follow us on Twitter at excruciatingpod. See you at the next episode.